Guys, we're going to England! Holy crap, this trailer looks really awesome. I don't know how Nintendo did it, but they have me more hyped about a region than I ever was about Johto, which previously before this trailer is like my favorite region of Pokemon of all time, by far, like through and through. But this trailer looks so good. The steampunk aesthetic, the architecture, the forests with their beautiful shading, the way the caves look with the crystals glowing, everything else, the aesthetic of this, the aesthetic, guys. It's so great. I have yet to get a chance to talk about Pokemon on this channel, and this is the perfect opportunity because this is the most hyped I've been for a Pokemon game in a very long time. They've got this super open world type of atmosphere going on from the little bit of gameplay that we've gotten. It seems like they've expanded upon the ideas that they implemented in games like Sun and Moon, and to a lesser extent in X and Y, which is absolutely incredible. It encourages exploration, taking in the atmosphere, which is always something I've absolutely adored about Pokemon. In addition to that, the developers say they're working on trying to make this the greatest game experience of Pokemon ever, which of course they probably say that with every Pokemon game, but this time I genuinely want to believe it. I mean, we're on the Switch, which is the highest powered system that a Pokemon game's ever come out on. It's the first time a theoretically home-based console, regardless of how you want to fall on that front with the Switch, is actually getting a main series Pokemon game, and it looks incredible. The cell shading here is far less distracting than it was in the 3DS games. There's a lot more emphasis on just like the characters and the overall designs there. They aren't relying on the cell shading to essentially mask the fact that there's a limited system. They are exploiting the power of the Switch, and it just looks absolutely delightful. So let's go ahead and get into actually breaking down this trailer a little bit now that I've gotten a minute to get over my hype. So like I said, based on the aesthetics I'm picking up from the architecture, the steampunk-ish type of a vibe, all the brick buildings, the style of the clothes that the people are wearing, this strikes me as being very much based off the UK, which is absolutely amazing. It goes right in tandem with the fact that these games are called Sword and Shield, and a lot of British history, at least when it's kind of viewed from around the world, is linked into that medieval era of folklore and fantasy, which goes right in line with that whole Sword and Shield mechanic, which looks really awesome. Leaves me incredibly curious as to what our legendaries are going to be based around, because at least in previous times, a lot of times the legendaries have had some tie into the titles of the game in some way, shape, or form. So I wonder if maybe we'll have one like based off a like couple of knights or something like that. Regardless, it's going to be really awesome. So let's go ahead and dive into a little bit more of the context of this trailer here. We also see a giant stadium. Now, one thing that they revealed in the trailer is we are going back to a gym mechanic and the fact that you want to conquer the Pokemon League. Now, granted, the Pokemon League's been a mainstay through all of the main series Pokemon games, but the fact that we see this giant stadium that looks essentially identical to that of what we used to see in the Pokemon League in the anime of the show, and I guess still do, I haven't really kept up a whole lot with the Pokemon anime, implies to me that maybe they've even changed the league mechanic to make it a little bit more diverse, a little more intriguing, trying to add some extra flair. Towards the end of this trailer, they talk about how they are really trying to explore new routes in order to make this the greatest Pokemon experience of all time, which, guys, I genuinely think this has the potential to be it. If you haven't watched the trailer, please do, because believe me, it will get you hyped. So this looks absolutely incredible. Adding to that stadium vibe, we see a soccer player walking into it, which strikes me as maybe they're implementing some more mini games into the Pokemon aesthetic. With kind of each of the games, we've gotten little mini things that you can do with them. For example, in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which are two of my favorite Pokemon games, I mean, Johto and everything else mixed in there on top of the fact that you have two regions, they allowed Pokemon to follow you around. You had like Pokemon parks you could explore in Diamond and Pearl. So maybe there's some kind of a sports mechanic where you can have like your Pokemon be a soccer team or something like that. Either way, that would be really awesome. One of the things everybody loves about Pokemon is being able to see the adorable and excellent character designs go around doing all kinds of different things. The battles look great here. It looks like the backgrounds going on in the battle may actually be based on where you're positioned in the map in this, which would be awesome. Essentially, it's something sort of like if you've ever played Chrono Trigger, where you stop and literally fight where you are on the map. It looks like you have a load screen to some extent, but it may just be like a transition overlay on the screen where you are. Now, granted, it could also be like Sun and Moon where it varies to some extent with where you are, but generally, like if you're on Route 32 or whatever, your background for Route 32 is always the same. Either way, it looks absolutely brilliant. Now, on top of this, let's get into what maybe the story may revolve around a little bit. Now, normally in Pokemon games, the story is usually based in some way, shape, or form around what we have going on with the legendaries here. Now, going back to the whole idea that this does seem to be based out of the UK in some way, shape, or form, we do know the stuff about the Sword and Shield. We also have one other sort of clue dropped upon us, and that's that you keep looking upon this hill at this sort of towering alien-like almost looking type of figure. It has somewhat of a human form in that it seems to be bipedal, have some arms and those types of things. There seem to be other critters floating around it. That type of symbology, usually within Pokemon, somehow represents the legendaries. Mix that with the sword and shield mechanic, and I'm wondering if we have some kind of like major like knight or something going on in terms of the legendaries and the story here. Gonna be hard to tell. I would be very, very surprised if we don't end up entering a castle or something like that at some point in terms of interacting with this. Once more, the whole sword and shield title, the titles usually tie into the legendaries, i.e. with Sun and Moon being respectively kind of representing the Sun and Moon, X and Y, the shapes of the Pokemon were literally there, going back to Ruby and Sapphire, those types of things. So we'll just have to wait and see what ends up happening on that front. Now, one key point about this story is that you have a lot you could potentially run off in terms of British folklore for a story like this, because you have the legends of King Arthur, you have all kinds of stories about various queens and the various royal families that they have. You can go back into history about things. There's a lot revolving around this that they could potentially use as inspiration. And if this indeed is some kind of like an alien thing engraved on the hill, then maybe it turns out that they do like some kind of a altered version of this legend that involves aliens or something like that. Regardless, it could be really, really cool to see in action. We'll just have to wait and see which route they go, guys. Story usually isn't always why you play Pokemon. A lot of times it's more so the gameplay and like the characters. So I don't think they have a ton riding in that area, which is kind of a good thing because it means not a lot of pressure for things to be perfect there. Now, we don't get a whole lot of reveal in terms of new Pokemon here, but I'm not necessarily complaining about that. I kind of like going into the region not knowing what I'm going to find because it emulates exactly what you're doing as the trainer, at least what the trainer's supposed to be experiencing as the player character, which is essentially exploring this land and discovering new Pokemon, not being like, oh, I'm looking for this thing I found on the internet. Now, some people like to play that way. I've kind of played through regions both ways throughout Pokemon's history, sometimes going in blind, having no idea what I'm going to encounter, sometimes going in having done a ton of internet research beforehand. Both ways are very fun, but I think going into this one as hyped as I am, I want that blind approach. I don't want to know a ton of the Pokemon going in. Now, with that being said, let's go and jump into the Pokemon that we did get revealed in this trailer, which overall I'm really liking the character designs of. It's been several regions since we've had a set of starters where I've been happy with all of the designs. Sun and Moon, they were all pretty decent. Rowlette's was okay. I really like its final evolution. I wasn't a huge big fan of Litten, but maybe that's just me. I know a lot of people who really like Litten and Incineroar especially. Gen 6, I wasn't huge on any of them except for Froakie. Chespin was alright, but I'm not a big fan of its final evolutions design, so on and so forth. These, I think, all look really good, so let's dive into them a little bit. So first off, we've got a Fire Rabbit and Scorbunny. This is personally the one I like the most. That's based off the kind of personification that they give it within the trailer, though, of hopping around a lot, having a lot of energy, having a lot of personality and excitement about it, which is really, really awesome. It's probably going to be the one I choose, guys, unless we get further information that really starts to lean into others. Pretty unusual. I usually go with the grass starter, but this isn't necessarily the case here. So next we have this water, frog, tadpole, chameleon type of thing in Sobble. I really like the fact that it's able to blend into its environment. This isn't something that we see implemented a whole ton in Pokemon, especially with this kind of animal inspiration for a design. I mean, the frog and tadpole type of inspirations have been used a lot, but the chameleon thing, I don't think we've really seen since Kecleon. So it's really awesome to see that happening again, and I think Sobble's design overall is really, really cute. On top of that, Sobble also seems to be our sort of softer and quieter toned Pokemon. A lot of times their starters, at least when they're portrayed in the trailers and such, each kind of have their own personality and such to kind of contrast one another. This one leans more into that softer side, and it seems like it could be pretty cool. I'm going to be curious to see what they do with the evolution of this, considering we already have a number of water, frog, and tadpole-based Pokemon, just to see how they distinguish it from the others, but I'm sure they'll do a pretty good job. The designs so far, once more, are looking excellent. And lastly, we've got a grass Chimp with a little twig through its head, known as Grookey. Now, Grookey on the whole, I think, just looks like a better version of Pansage with a little bit of, like, inspiration from, say, like, Turtwig with the twig around its head and such. I think it looks really, really cool. It looks a little more tropical than something like Pansage 2, which is a little odd to me with the geographic location they seem to be going for, but I don't necessarily mind it. I'm not really huge on criticizing them for necessarily contradicting the geographical region they're going for. I also don't know a ton about the animal life that lives within England, if that is what they're basing it off of, so I could be completely wrong there as well. Regardless, these overall designs look really, really awesome, and on the whole, that basically wraps up what we know about this trailer so far. It looks like we're going to get some good customization, some decent amounts of open world exploration, which is pretty awesome to see. I'm sure we're going to be getting a crap ton new Pokemon like we always do. We know Gym's return, we know the Pokemon League's a thing. Looks like they might be taking a little bit of a different spin on it with this whole stadium type of approach, which I think would be awesome. Even if they aren't putting a different spin, the idea of actually being in a stadium and feeling a little bit closer to that anime style Pokemon League would be really, really cool. We'll have to see what's going on with that sports player in the soccer uniform. Of course, it could always be something similar to what we had in Black and White, where there's these sort of sports stadiums you can go into to battle people and train, those types of things. All of that being said, guys, this game is coming out late 2019. I'm going to pre-order it as soon as pre-orders go up, which they may already be up on GameStop.com. I'm making this video right after the trailer, so I don't even know. But as per usual, be sure to let me know your thoughts, comments, etc. Which starter's your favorite? All those types of things in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. If not, constructive criticism is always welcome. And I'll catch you guys next time with some more trailer breakdowns.